Hi everyone, welcome to my review of John Carpenter's The Fog from 1980. So yes, here we are, back again of course. Another horror film to review here, and yes, here it is on Blu-ray. A brand new restoration, as it says there, and this actually came today. Today's Thursday the 24th, a week until Halloween, so you know, of course, been in a few horror reviews of course once again. Texas Chainsaw, one of my favourites of course, and this film, hadn't seen this, and you know, spoilers again, spoilers warning, just in case anyone's not seen the film, be warned. But yes, had not seen this in many, many years. Although when I was a kid, you know, I'd watched this many, many times. You know, I had it on DVD and stuff as well, and it would just be one of them films, one of them horror films that I just watch quite a bit. And yes, you know, I think probably my most watched John Carpenter film, although not my favourite. You know, you can maybe have a think about what that one is. But yes, this film, really wanted to check this out on Blu-ray. I must say I was a bit, you know, underwhelmed with the actual restoration. You know, it says, yeah, restored in 4K. There is some issues with this Blu-ray. I'll just get this out of the way. You know, there's a bit of flickering, a bit of noise, you know, within the picture, and it's just, it is a bit off-putting. There's kind of the moments, especially, you know, in the dark, you know, which is quite a bit of the film, where there is, you know, it's quite noticeable, and but you know, in terms of, you know, that's worse, I would say, obviously, than the previous times I've seen it. But the colours and, you know, the general stuff that Blu-rays do enhance, of course, the crispness in certain areas, of course, and just the overall the audio as well. I think definitely an improvement. But yeah, there is some issues with the transfer itself, the restoration. Just to note that, of course. But yes, this film, as I say, I just, you know, I do love this film. I think it's not a masterpiece for me, but wow, you know, I do love this film. I think it's a great film overall, and yes, I think, you know, this is an interesting one, and you know, being my first John Carpenter to review, yeah, very interesting as well how it ended up being this. I would have thought it'd be The Thing, but yeah, it's not. But yes, eventually I will review all of his films, and I just really wanted to pick this one up, and of course, watching it tonight, you know, I just love this film. I think it's great. You know, it's just the one that's a real comfort watch for me, and you know, there's something about this film that's just so peaceful, so comforting, and kind of easy, not easy watch, but yeah, it's kind of one of them films that's just so enjoyable in that sense, so charming, you know, and just wow, it's a tense film, but this is interesting. You know, this is not well received. Certainly at the time, you know, it's quite trashed, of course. But yes, you know, this film is kind of in the middle, you could say, of John Carpenter's real heights in terms of his success and popularity. You know, before, of course, Escape from New York and The Thing, but just after the Elvis, obviously, TV film there, and Halloween in '78. So very interesting. Of course, he done Dark Star, Assault on Precinct 13 as well before that. But so it's kind of in the middle here of his, you know, kind of big success here. But the kind of least popular, you could say at times. It's not, you know, it's got more of a cult following than anything, really. But yeah, it's just kind of interesting because I do think this is a great film, and I think, you know, I like Halloween. You know, I am a fan. Not the biggest fan, you know, I've said that a few times, but I do like it. But I would take The Fog personally, just a personal thing, over Halloween. I think it's a better film. I think it is definitely a better horror film, just better acting and everything as well, and characters, and just overall the atmosphere to the picture. There's things like in Halloween where, you know, the music is better and stuff, but yeah, personally, you know, while I do like Halloween, I think this is actually a better film. Again, it's not my favourite Carpenter film, but yes, you know, it's just what an enjoyable film. You know, this is such an interesting one as well, with the plot to this, and opens up with a very campy scene around the campfire. You know, and one of the main characters here, Andy, you know, little kid here, and he's basically the son of Stevie, and yeah, basically is the son of of course, the woman who basically, you know, talks over the radio, you know, at the lighthouse, of course, and played by Adrienne Barbeau, and yes, basically she's great in the film, and yeah, he's kind of getting told this story, basically setting up the film, and this this elderly guy is basically saying, 100 years ago, there's this kind of shipwreck. Of course, there's this event, and yes, there's been this being 100 years since this kind of community, Antonio Bay, around this. It's kind of was founded. So it's kind of they're celebrating this centenary of this community, of this kind of the foundation of this, and that's what's going on, of course. But this whole kind of weird mystery, this tragedy that happened 100 years ago, and yes, of course, the first act, is basically the first occurrences, of course, with the fog, and things happen, very strange things, of course. Windows are getting smashed and all this kind of stuff, and these sailors, these three sailors, getting killed. The first victims in the film, these ghosts, of the wreckage, which of course happened 100 years ago, led by Blake, and yes, he's the main kind of villain of the film, you could say, and yes, just all unfolds from there. You've got the scenes in the day as well, more of the kind of investigating, the kind of character development, if you will, and it's just very, very short film, this one, 90 minutes, of course, and I think it is a great film. I think it's such a well-made horror film. The cinematography, the editing, all this kind of stuff. This film is really wonderfully directed, in my opinion. It really is something else. I think there's such an atmosphere to this film, and it's certainly down to the way the film was shot, and very, very sophisticated, visuals in this film, and it's a real kind of a gradual unfolding of events. It's certainly very gradual. It's very kind of it takes its time, kind of to establish the kind of the history to this. I love how this has kind of got this ancient kind of mystery to it, and these ghosts, of course, coming back within the fog. And of course it's been criticised, and not everyone will kind of like the main villain being kind of the fog, if you will, and everyone trying to get away from that. I think some people find that flat. They don't find it very scary at all. Of course, I've heard, but on the contrary, I think this is a great idea, and the execution of this is really quite remarkable. I think just the way, the eeriness of this, of seeing the fog, in the distance even, and the kind of glow that it has, it's just genius. Of course, the effects are absolutely stunning in this film, and just the overall lighting. I think the lighting to this film is stunning. It really, really is. Everything is just so atmospheric, to this film, and I think just the designs, of these ghosts, it's just so good. It's quite gross, of course, when you do see certain moments, revealed towards the end of the film. There's maggots and stuff, maggots coming out of the cheeks and everything. It's really quite gross, of course, but I love how Carpenter, never really revealing the actual full-on, kind of view of any of the faces of these, of this crew, of these, ghosts, and Blake. Of course, you do see kind of his eyes and stuff, the red glow, of course, and mainly, and of course, he's got a sword and everything, but you don't fully see these kind of ghosts here at all throughout the film. So that's great. It kind of, even in the end, it kind of has this mystery that's maintained, and just. I love how you do kind of find things out at the end. The ending we'll get to is a bit slightly flawed, I feel, and it's things I kind of think a bit kind of wasted potential in places. I think I would have liked kind of a bit more in the way of just how it was kind of wrapped up, and I don't think the ending's perfect. But yes, up until that, I'm so compelled by these kind of the lore of the film. I'm really so interested. Of course, Father Malone is one of the characters who basically is, he's kind of reading into this, and he finds, of course, this book. It basically recounts this and what's happened, and he kind of figures out over the course of the film what needs to happen, in the end. And of course, as we know, in the end, he does sacrifice himself, and Nick, the character Nick, who I love in the film, basically saves him, pulls him away from the cross, and of course, yes, basically Blake and his crew, disappear. Kind of, you think they're gone, but then right at the end, of course, they come back for Father Malone, and because it said that they need 6 victims, 6 people must die. Of course, it says that on the kind of the driftwood, of course, that one of the characters finds, and Andy, of course, first finding this, just washed up on the shore, and yes, it's saying that 6 people need to die, and in the end, of course, he does get killed. That's the last shot, which I don't quite feel is the best way to end the film exactly on that note. But yeah, maybe if they had just kind of surrounded him, or even then just how they kind of came back for him, would they have just gone, after that and stuff, and left the rest of the town alone, maybe for another 100 years or so? I don't know what's going on there, but that's the thing, there's something in the ending where, it wraps it up, mostly some things are unanswered, but then it kind of goes again, and it kind of leaves more questions, I think, and just didn't quite end in the way I think was quite perfectly suited to the overall film, the tone, and just this whole narrative. But the ending act is absolutely amazing, in my opinion. I think it's just so enjoyable. Aside from the kind of the overall visuals of the film and the music, of course, which is once again composed by John Carpenter himself. He's done this for a few of his films, including Halloween, which is of course a great score, definitely, and it's just really great how he's kind of done these scores. He's directed these films, of course, co-writing this with Deborah Hill. It was, and yes, just a great script in my opinion, great ideas to this film, and the music just being so great. But aside from all this, you've got these great characters, a few of them anyway, and I think that's what really I get attached to these characters, of course, and Elizabeth, kind of, you could say the main one of the main characters, played by once again Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, kind of joining Carpenter here again after Halloween, and I think she's even better in this than she was in Halloween, I think, and yes, just very enjoyable character in this. I think I really got attached, to her and Nick, Elizabeth and Nick. I really like this romance in the film. Really love this, and how it kind of began. It was kind of just really, yeah, it's just very enjoyable. I think, of course, she's hitchhiked, and she got in the car, of course, and yes, they do form this relationship, and they are together throughout the rest of the film, and that's what I got really attached to this. It was just very enjoyable, very charming film, this, and certain other characters as well. I think I really liked Andy, of course, Stevie, as well. Really great character there. Dan as well, very enjoyable. And his death was quite brutal. But yes, it's something that this is a film. Yes, speaking of the deaths, I think, wow, this is quite a brutal film. Certainly. Yeah, I watched this as a kid. It was one of the first horrors that I saw, and I was very scared of this film. Not just the kind of the atmosphere and the creepiness, but the actual way that deaths happen. They are brutal in this film. There's quite, of course, John Carpenter films, violent, but this is quite. There's something about this one that's very, kind of rigid. It's quite a dirty, kind of feeling with the kills. They are really. He does not hold back in this film in terms of just how these deaths happen. There's one moment, of course, where this guy, one of the 3 sailors, of course, near the beginning of the film, basically, you kind of, it implies what happens, and you find out later it did. He gets his eyes stabbed. So very brutal. And later on, you actually basically see this as well. Of course, and there's a scene in this film, yes, that involving. That character there, his body. There's a sheet over the body, and this is a scene that I had just remembered. I thought it was in this film. Again, I hadn't seen it for many years, but it literally is one of the scariest scenes for me. It's in the daytime, and Jamie Lee Curtis is basically standing in this room with the body, and the sheet is there, and basically starts moving, and then the guy gets out. He starts walking over to her, and it's just the use of the editing there is just really stunning, and just the way you don't quite see everything, kind of thing here. It's just genius stuff, the tension, and when he does fall onto the ground, it's just really such a scary scene, and I always remember that scene was one of the ones that I kind of always got scared of as a kid, and just wow, this is such a scary film. This is a real creepiness to it, and it never kind of The great thing, obviously, is that it doesn't reveal everything, although slightly, it could have been revealed a bit more in the plot. And just the overall way that John Carpenter does not show too much. Of course, it's just great filmmaking here. The way he implies certain things, in the film, and yes, just the overall. The way that, there's such a mystery to this, and because it's kind of happened many, many years ago, this kind of event, this tragedy, which we do learn about, of course, kind of flips the film very smartly, and because of this and the whole mystery feel of it, and the overall subtlety, of course, to the filmmaking, I just think this is such a disturbing film. It is a scary film, this, and certainly moments in the film as well, kind of jump scares, but just so well done. And yes, these deaths, though, just wow, there's something about this, and the weapons, the tools, these ghosts, these sailors, of course, are using, the hooks and everything. It's just, it really is something else, the way that this is done, as well, the death of, Andy, of course, is getting looked after, the elderly woman there, and basically when she opens the door, very smartly there, opening the door and letting him in, and then she turns her back, of course, and that is brutal, even though it's not fully shown, of course, but just the way you see the hooks going into her and the weapons, and she's obviously fallen to the floor, and these probably about three or four kind of ghosts here, all kind of stabbing her, killing her there. It's just such a brutal film in that sense. Again, not showing too much, but it kind of there's a real, as I said, a kind of a rigid feeling, a stiff, dirty feeling to the way that the kind of for example, people getting stabbed. Of course, it's just such a brutal film, and the reactions, of course, really, really disturbing, this film. And I just think the way that the fog is just can kind of get into anything, in under the doors, of course, coming through there, and it's just such a kind of relentless film in that sense, although very, very gradual. It's such a patient film, this, and I think it should have, there's a couple of flaws that I have for the film, but and we'll get them out of the way. And I think it should have been a bit longer, this one, actually, I think. And looking at this film, I think I would have liked a bit more character development from the characters that I already loved. I think to elevate the film, maybe 15, 20 minutes, to this, and actually as well, dedicating a tiny bit more time to the overall kind of explanation of this as well. A tiny bit, not too much. Just a little bit of tweaking there, and the character development, I think, it would have benefited even more, because there's moments where, in the second half, there's just moments where I thought maybe with just a bit more kind of character building there, a bit more kind of with the relationships, and then the final act as well would have been even better through that. But there's just a bit, Jamie Lee Curtis's character of Elizabeth, and Nick as well. I think, if these characters it had followed through. To its potential here with some of this, and it would have been higher marks from me. And I think it would be a couple of these things. It would have brought it closer for sure to that masterpiece level, really, for me, because everything else is just mostly stunning. It's just a few things slightly with the potential here. I think just add a bit more to this, to some of the characters. There's a couple of characters, one or two as well. A flaw here, just maybe not as great as they could have been. Janet Leigh's in the film, and I think I enjoyed her in the film, obviously, and it's great that, it's really interesting how, she obviously mother and daughter in the film here, Jamie Lee Curtis, Janet Leigh, but yes, her character, specifically, of course, I like the involvement in the plot, but her character individually, could have been better, I think, and yes, but it's something where the main characters, the father as well, and you've got Andy, and you've got Stevie, Nick and Elizabeth. I do really love these characters in particular. It's just, I think, even more character development, even more time with these characters, I think would have really elevated the film, and just some of the other side characters, maybe just add a bit more to them. And I think that's the main flaws really here, and a couple of bits. As I say, the way it ends is kind of, I think could have been a bit better, but that's just personal kind of things with the film. It is a great film for sure, just not quite a masterpiece for me, not quite there. It could have been, definitely, but yes, I just love the themes in this film as well. The overall sense as well, just of isolation, and but there's something about this film, the kind of way this is this community, of course, kind of. It's quite a kind of peaceful place, but then not as all it kind of seems, and this whole kind of this celebration of this, being 100 years of this community in this town. There's something about this very twisted. We find, that the of course with the ghosts, of course, wanting to get revenge on the descendants, of course, of those who did kill them. This is something that's very. It's like the whole kind of community and the way they. Their lives is built on lies. That's something that's very interesting in this film, and it's kind of adds this really complex kind of feeling to this, and it's not all as it seems, and it's kind of playing to that fact, of people suffering for past mistakes or past things happening, and of their ancestors and stuff. It's very, very interesting how Carpenter does this in the film, and just the overall. The way that it's kind of, it's just this whole feeling of it's built on lies, it's built on this kind of this tragic event, and it's kind of a falsehood, of course, and they're celebrating this. It's kind of these speeches and everything, but then of course, what happened. We do learn quite a few things, of course. It kind of flips the film, and it adds this layer to the film. Although I think in the the very, very final moments, I think it could have been just delivered in even more of a kind of a clearer way, perhaps, and just more emotion to that. I think actually that's the thing that I'm mainly thinking about. The emotional feeling and the tone of it, and the consistency of that. Just following through a tiny bit more in the final act, in that sense, in the final moments. And then it would have been, probably a masterpiece for me, or at least very, very close. All these, little things I've had with the film. There aren't, big, big issues at all. Just things I think, could have elevated the film even higher. But regardless, I think this is a great film. So enjoyable. I love the location, of course. The way it's a peaceful feeling. It's a comforting film, but very, very tense indeed. And truly, a horror film that is scary. And I mean this. For me anyway, a scary, scary film. It's not a cheap film at all. It really is a patient one. That I think, and there could have been more depth, as I say, could have been more character development, but the characters, the main characters, even despite that, are great characters in my opinion, and I think just the relationships in the film, and of course, Stevie as well, wanting to kind of get to her son, Andy, all this, it's very, very investing, I feel, and it's just something where the actual enemy, well, you could say the villain is the fog, you could also say it's the people that built that founded the community as well, perhaps, and just how this is kind of having an effect on their descendants, and how they're paying for their past mistakes, of course. That's something that's really interesting. So you could kind of say that, and the fog is maybe a foil, but the fog is in itself, the way it's portrayed in the film, so menacing, so eerie. There's such an atmosphere to this film, and just the way that it has this glow, of course. The effects are just so good, and just the lighting, the framing is absolutely stunning in this film, and the shots, of course, just outside, and stuff where you kind of the camera pans and just showing the coast, of course, the sea there, and then it goes back around to the car. Particular scene in the middle of the film, and that's the one that I really. Wow, that's a great shot there. Stunning. The cinematography throughout is pretty much perfect. I think just absolutely stunning, and the editing as well. It's such a flow to the film. There's never a moment in this film, that's kind of flat or anything. As I say, this is a film that kind of. It's certainly a film that I think the main issues is that it didn't go even further with these characters and some of this. The lore to the film, and actually as I say, if it had been about 20 minutes longer and included some of these things, then I think it would have been even better. It would have been probably quite close to a masterpiece, if not a masterpiece, and that's the thing. It's wonderfully edited, it's wonderfully shot and everything, and I think it could easily have gone for quite a bit longer. I would have loved to have seen that, and I think it just had a bit more potential for that, and I think it's just the direction overall, in this film, is just stunning. I think John Carpenter is a great director. I've seen quite a few of his films, and maybe not even when I was quite young, of course, watching some of his films, and not realizing, and well, not necessarily going out of my way to see specific John Carpenter films, but I've seen quite a lot actually. I've seen about 10 of his films. I've seen Escape from New York, LA. I've seen The Ward, which wasn't good. That's a more recent one, of course. I didn't really like that, but I've seen quite a few of his films, of course. He's done quite a lot of films, not just done horror films. He's done quite a few things here. Starman is a film that I really want to check out as well. That one really, really intrigues me, definitely. But yes, this film is definitely one of his great films for me. I think it's a great film. I have to give it a 90%. So yeah, I think it's not a popular film overall. It's more of a cult following. But I really, really, I do love this film actually. I think it's wonderfully directed. There's a real. I love the enemies, the designs for this, all the costumes and everything, and the effects are just so good. There's moments in this film that are truly, truly masterful. This is at times, masterful horror, and it's of course you've got some great characters in the film, some aren't so good, or as good, in the film, but you have got a kind of a narrative that's very invested, in my opinion. I love the enemies, of course, and Blake is just such a, I just think it's kind of a mythic feeling to this. I love this whole kind of the way these ghosts, of course, are kind of built up, and the exposition to this. Some might think is a bit convoluted, of course, perhaps, but yeah, I think it's it has got some issues, mainly in the kind of final moments, and later on in the film where it could have I think I would have liked just a specific kind of a few things that I would have liked kind of added to the film in that sense, and also just some more character development, to the characters that I already loved, and maybe in the first half or the first 2/3, yes, the character development is stronger. Maybe it doesn't quite follow through perfectly, as it goes on, but then the final act, in other ways is just so good. The tension, how they're trying to escape the fog, in the car and everything on foot. It's just so enjoyable, and I love this location, as I've said, Antonia Bay. Such a great location, the way it's portrayed, the kind of isolation to it, and just adding so much, in that sense, to when the fog does come in and kind of shroud this community, this coastal town. And I think there's such a real weird kind of feeling to this whole, event that took place so many years ago in the film, and it's kind of, it has got a kind of really, really disturbing feeling to this, and I think the way that the deaths happen in the film as well, the way the characters are picked off, is really, really great. There's not a single one that isn't just truly brutal and just kind of thrilling, thrilling. I think they're all great, and there's moments even in the daytime as well which are really, really disturbing. The street scene, of course, being one of the highlights in that sense, and just wow, that's how you make a kind of a scary scene. The editing there is just so good, and just the camera placements, the kind of use of focus there, just right there, really, really great, and really, really just a disturbing film psychologically as well. The whole thought of this, and how this kind of past tragedy and stuff flips different things in the film, and it kind of is this commentary as well on this kind of community and stuff, and how basically this this town and this community is built, you could say, on lies, and how it kind of, it adds a real element, kind of questioning things, overall kind of complexity to the film, and just kind of questions of humanity and stuff. Really, really digs into this, and how these these different characters in the film, and this community are kind of suffering, of course, for these past events. And yeah, it's just some great visual storytelling, of course. This film, as I've said, is wonderfully directed, really, really great in the filmmaking department here, and the music, of course. Maybe at times minimalist, but I love this kind of score to the film. And John Carpenter really, really wonderfully composing this, and the way it's used in the film. to create this uneasy feel. There is a sadness to this score actually as well. I love that there's a couple of notes and a couple of moments within the film where the score is used, and it's kind of conveys this. It's a real feeling to this, real melancholy feeling, and just overall kind of twisted, tragic feeling within the score. Actually, I feel, and I love it. I think it's just great, this film, and it has got flaws in my opinion. It's not quite a masterpiece for me. And wrapping up now, just some character development. I think this could have been a bit longer for my liking. Just dedicate more time to some of the characters in particular, and just going to greater heights with these characters, and just some of the plot, what happens in the end with Blake and his crew and stuff, and just some things there that I think could have been a bit better. And yeah, just as I say, some of the other characters as well could have been a bit better there. But overall, a great film. This is definitely one of John Carpenter's great films for me. Among his best, I think. Certainly of the ones that I've seen. Really, really is such an enjoyable film. Very comforting film. Love the location, of course, and love the visuals and some of the characters. Yeah, just a very, very enjoyable film. I love this film personally. Among my favourite horrors for sure. And yes, tell me your thoughts in the comments, of course, and just John Carpenter thoughts, of course. My first review, which is interesting. It's interesting now. It's probably the first John Carpenter film that I saw actually, and yes, it's great that this is my first review. But I didn't plan that. I thought I'd probably review a few of his films before this, but it just so happens, of course, that this is the first. But yes, tell me your thoughts, and just be great to discuss this film. And as always, thanks for watching my review.